As a new church start, we don't really have a home, so to speak, in a place that we can go and have an Ash Wednesday service. Just we kind of have to be reminded to make our home where the community is. And for us, this is about taking that expression of Ash Wednesday to the community and to making that our home, to be reminded of the ways that we connect with people, not just in one specific building or time or place, but everywhere we go.
And as a new church community, a community of faith that's called to spread the news of life and in incarnation being vital with flesh and bone and skin on, we thought the mall, which is known as a place of consumerism and materialism, that it would be good to trespass boundaries just a little bit to show that the sacred and the holy are not really divided, but really everything is sacred. And God blesses and loves all his people, regardless of where they happen to be or what juncture in their life they happen to be going through. Ash Wednesday is the beginning of Lent, and it's the beginning of the remembrance of Jesus' 40 days in the desert, a time of trial where he fasted and prayed and spent some time reflecting out in the wilderness. And the ashes are just to remind us that we come from the dust, we come from inanimate objects that God breathed into. The molecules that we're made of are lifeless, and yet somehow they come together and they have this life and vitality in them. And so we put the sign of the cross in ashes to remind people that the material they were made from was lifeless, and yet they've been brought to life, and then they'll return to that state of ashes and dust at some point, to remember our own mortality.
Yeah, and I'm finding it, and we've talked with other clergy about this too, that there is kind of this wide variety of meaningfulness around Ash Wednesday, especially around the mark of the cross on the forehead. And for some people right now in their lives, it's a symbol of solidarity with people who are poor and suffering, that reminder of what death does to us, not just our own death, but death around us, throughout creation, really. But also the connection that we have to each other, the common stuff that we're all made of. My son, when I came home today, wanted to put ashes on his forehead, and it wasn't because he understood the full meaning, but because he wanted to be like Mama, because he understood that connection, that we do this together. We all have this mark that somehow we're deeply connected. And I think for a lot of people, that meaning is really relevant right now, that we're all in this together somehow, and this is a time for us to be reminded of that and to look forward with that understanding. It's an open community for us, and this is one way that we can, even for a moment, when we're imposing those ashes, for them to feel a part of a wider community.
We've been in the Skywalk system, and we were also, Jen and Alejandro, another United Methodist pastor, met outside on an off-ramp outside of Smoky Row, correct?
Yep. And we also had a couple of clergy who were riding one of the bus routes today, too. And part of that has been, especially like you're saying in the mall, for people to kind of be confronted with the sacred and the holy in the midst of their everyday lives, and maybe even in a time and a place where they don't want to be confronted with that. So you're driving to work and you just want to get to work, and all of a sudden you see these two people walking in between the cars, a symbol of God in the midst of their everyday life. And even if they don't want ashes, or even if they don't even give us a look, that somehow, hopefully, that God uses that as a reminder to them that God's with them, that there's something bigger going on, and that they're a part of it as well.
We've had a lot of Catholic folks who've had a couple of questions about us as clergy, and there have been a little bit of surprises when Jen, for example, has been the one to pass out ashes, that they're expecting. In their world, the role of the priest is usually a man. We have a lot of people have been grateful that they've expressed that they didn't have time to participate in Ash Wednesday service in the evening because of their job or because of their busy lives and schedule, and so they recognize this is a service that we're taking to church and taking a service out into the world. So they've been grateful for that. We've also had some less than enthusiastic responses as well, which has been interesting to encounter as well.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the most telling stuff happened this morning on the off-ramp, because I think we were kind of inconveniencing people a little bit more than they wanted to be. So we had people who would wave, or who would give us a peace sign or smile at us. We had people who would completely avert any eye contact. There's one woman who honked at us and gave us a really dirty look. But for us, that's an expression of kind of people's true approach to religion, or true approach to what they see as religion in the community. And hopefully we didn't reinforce a whole lot of the negative pieces. But I think that in those public spaces, in those places where people aren't expecting to encounter the holy or the sacred, is when sometimes their truest feelings about it come out. And so it's been interesting to kind of be the holder for those for a little bit today, to be where people can project those feelings, and kind of see what that feels like for us too.
And we're also inviting other people to be invited into that living symbolism, that they too, we went down to the Skywalk system over the lunch hour, which is where a lot of people work. And so they were called into, given the opportunity to be that outward living sign for their coworkers, for their friends. And you could tell for some people, a lot of people wanted to thank us and encourage us in what we're doing, but also to politely decline from being that symbol themselves because of potential repercussions for what that public image about your faith would mean in those workspaces and public environments.
We had a little encounter here at the mall. This is not a place where this type of religious expression is welcome. And it does kind of raise your hackles a little bit to try to defend what you feel like you're called to do, but also to receive some of that kind of bad press or bad feedback from people. But a big thing that I've been trying to remember and be reminded of in doing this and in the planning part of this too is that this is just one little moment in people's lives. It's one moment in our lives, really, and that we're doing it as an offering really to God and saying we're going to do this in this place, in this time. We don't have a follow-up plan. We don't have a discipleship pathway based on this point going forward, but we offer it and we open it up with the hopes that this is something that God can use, knowing that this is the kind of thing that God can use. And we don't have to necessarily take on all the bad feelings that other people have had, but we can just let that go and know that God is working in that.
I think it's been, in a lot of ways, a really interesting experience to see for some of those public perceptions about Christianity and clergy and the church come to life, because we got all sorts of curiosity. A lot of people just genuinely didn't know what we were doing. They didn't know what the ashes were for. They didn't know why there were fingerprints on people's heads. And there's some people that were clearly annoyed that we were upsetting their space and their comfort zone with this thing that was intrusive. They were experiencing as intrusive in their path to their next destination. But it's also been really, really heartwarming too that this is an opportunity for people to treat one another humanely, and for strangers who understand what we're trying to do and the gift that we're trying to offer, to smile and show their signs of appreciation, and to also bring to the surface this common bond that we have in our faith that we don't necessarily have public signs for all the time, and so that private, what some people will take as a private sharing, isn't always right.